can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, we are going to be talking about X-Men Xavier's Secrets. Now, this issue, while it is technically titled Xavier's Secrets, it actually has about as much to do with the secret of Cyclops. So his secret is really not nefarious or weird or off-putting or anything of that nature in the way that Charles Xavier's secret is. So I don't think Cyclops's undying love for Jean Grey would have worked as a subtitle for this book, and I'm glad they didn't do that. But yes, if you go into this book, you are also going to get, I don't want to call it a sub-story, but like it's a primary story, but I think it's really kind of like more like wrestling. The story that comes first ain't really the story that you came there for. This is the opening bout, the curtain jerker, bout, if you will. Enhancement talent, I think, is actually the more preferred nomenclature these days. A dark match. That's basically what the Cyclops Jean Grey portion of this story is. It's basically, yeah, Cyclops loves Jean Grey, and how, I guess, I won't necessarily say how far he's willing to go to protect that love, but just how far he's thought ahead about their relationship and kind of putting them in a very specific place. Something that I think people who are fans of Cyclops and Jean, or Jean and Wolverine, or the throuple that was going on during the Krakoan era, I feel like this is basically, I mean, it could just be Alex Packnadell's way, but considering that this was written and probably passed down through the X office from Tom Brevoort, I'm pretty sure this is the status quo going forward. There is no throuple. It is just Cyclops and Jean. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about our guy, Professor Fuckboy Charles Xavier. That's who I'm actually here to talk about, because this book is carrying a lot of water for Charles, and at the same time, still holding him incredibly accountable. But the thing that I have been, keeping my foot, on Charles's fictional neck for is how he just threw in with Orcus just like that. He didn't even have to be tortured. He didn't have to be beat down. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, I could rehash the whole thing. And honestly, I probably will encourage you to go check out whatever video that I have linked up here. I'm sure that will kind of encapsulate everything, but just for simplicity's sake, I'll just boil it down to Charles Xavier had an opportunity to save mutant kind from Orcus, and quite literally have mutant kind be walled off into a very specific section of Earth. Meanwhile, machines would have taken over the entire world, and that just would have been that on that. That was the deal that Charles Xavier made, and in order for that deal to be cemented, he had to effectively kill a bunch of people. It largely came down to about specifically 12 people, all in high-ranking levels of power. That was basically the long and short of it. Though it did seem there were some other consequences that were involved in that. These specific people doing things that would technically kill other people too. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. Once again, just go check out this video up here. Just go do that. This book, while it does not undo any of the previous sins of Charles Xavier, which are many, they're many. There's more than what this book will actually tell you. But I feel like because Alex understood that in relitigating all of the sins of Charles Xavier, it was better to just stick to the greatest hits as opposed to hitting you with the B-sides too, even though I feel like some of the B-sides are worse than the A-sides in this case. Case in point, the fact that he put together what is effectively a child soldier army, the X-Men. A lot of people tend to forget, the X-Men were teenagers. They were teenagers, like 16, 17 years old. It's always really weird to me how people compartmentalize age.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
unless those children are like close to being 18 years old. The closer kids are to being 18 years old, the more people are willing to let a lot of fuckery slide. It's kind of like, you know, when the whole Dr. Disrespect thing happened and everybody was like, oh, I mean, he was talking to a minor. I mean, she was under 18, but I mean, she was 17, so I guess it's okay. You always get that kind of energy. And they do the same thing for the X-Men too when it comes to calling them child soldiers, which, I mean, to be fair, that's what they were. They were under 18. They were child soldiers. Full stop. There is no arguing that. You can argue with your mama, don't argue with me. The other thing that they bring up is what happened with Deadly Genesis. Deadly Genesis, for those who don't know, was a story arc that basically retconned some of the events of the X-Men's early history, specifically what happened when the OG original recipe X-Men got trapped on Krakoa back in the olden days, the before times when the X-Men was actually quite mid, and Charles had sent in a team, characters that were introduced back retconned into the X-Men's history, namely characters like Darwin, Petra, and Sway, as well as a third Summers brother, Vulcan, and how Charles sent those mutants to die to find his original mutants, and even after the fact, how he tried to hide their existence. Even the knowledge that Cyclops and Havoc had a brother, another brother who was lost out in the weeds, completely wiped him from their memories. Also, what is brought up here, and this is more during the Astonishing X-Men run, was where it was revealed the Danger Room is actually not just some inanimate object. It was actually a person, an actual sentient artificial intelligence that was based on Shi'ar technology. It was alive. It had feelings, thoughts. It was not just some thing to be a slave to Charles Xavier, but Charles Xavier, he had to train his child soldier army. Too bad for you and your hopes and dreams and wishes. Forget you, Danger. Sorry, but yeah, I gotta train these babies. These babies need to be trained. Their lives need to be in danger. Thus, I'm calling you, Danger. You are the Danger Room. I gotta have it. Hashtag sorry, not sorry, Danger. There were also the Xavier protocols that cropped up during Excalibur, which basically was Charles Xavier pulling what was effectively a Batman Tower of Babel moment. If some of you may remember the Justice League story arc where Batman had secret files on how to perfectly neutralize every member of the Justice League, well, Xavier had the same thing, but for his own X-Men. Case one of them, I don't know, got out of line. Like I said, this book is hitting you with the greatest hits of Charles's crimes against his own kind. Personally, I actually think it was a missed opportunity to not bring up how he had feelings for Jean Grey and wanted to hook up with her, but the only thing that was keeping him from wanting to do so was not the fact that it would be indecent. No, not the fact that he was her teacher. No, not the fact that he had even, technically some of this was kind of retconned into existence, but the fact that he had known her prior since she was a child. But no, the simple fact that his legs didn't work. Yep, that was why. That was the reason why. That was the actual reason why he didn't try and get with what was at the time a 16, 17-year-old Jean Grey. So, yeah. And you can argue that, oh, well, the times were different. The times were different. The laws were to the wall. That's where you belong. You belong on the wall.
Right away. No trial, no nothing.
Get your pedo ass back. You got to go to the wall. You have to go to the wall. But no, to get more into what Charles is being held accountable for here and what he's not being held accountable for, it's that very thing that he did during the Fall of X. It was the notion that he worked with Orchis and he killed people in doing so and had basically turned his back on all his ideals. But where this book loses me, and I like the setup of it, I like the general story of it, but the point where it just full sail loses me is when it tries to rehabilitate Charles Xavier's image by going through this convoluted method. And actually, I think Alex knew that this was really convoluted because it's even kind of poked fun at in this issue as well. And for those who know what I'm talking about, this issue is framed around a character who I think some people probably don't even remember, but her name is Sally Floyd. She's a normal human who happened to have a mutant daughter. The mutant daughter in question being Minnie. That daughter had a really weird mutant power, one that caused her to regress in age, and she regressed to the point that she died. And this drove Sally into alcoholism, but she was an ally to the X-Men. She even dated Warren Worthington III, aka Angel, for a while, and even funny enough, Angel pops up in this book and they get to have a little back and forth, though I do kind of feel like that back and forth is a little cold, but once you kind of figure out what's going on, you quickly figure out why. But at the behest of Ben Urich, longtime confidant of Daredevil and now owner of the Daily Bugle, Ben Urich put Sally up to investigating Charles Xavier. And in the midst of investigating Charles Xavier, this is kind of where we learn what Charles has actually been up to since the fall of X, ever since he fell into his catatonic state. He has basically been subconsciously reaching out to Sally. We find out that the very thing that Sally is doing right now, she has largely been doing for quite some time and just did not know it. And she ends up running in circles, ultimately. In the end, we discover that Charles has basically been moving chess pieces and trying to hide a truth. And the truth is that all the things he did, the crimes he committed during the Fall of X era that would largely put him on anyone's shit list, mind you, weren't real. Well, they were real. Let's put it like this. So all those 12 people that he supposedly killed weren't real people. They were cloned. Charles basically took some of the bodies of the Orchis soldiers who had attacked Krakoa during what was largely the immortal X-Men run of the Fall of X. It had been revealed that Charles has killed some Orchis soldiers. I'm not really here to relitigate that one, but Charles was in a dark place. He thought all of his X-Men were dead. He thought he was one of the last ones still standing, so he was in a very weird place. And because of that, he also took those very same bodies, used Mr. Sinister's cloning facilities on Krakoa, and created 12 perfect bodies in order to infiltrate the very same space station that was destroyed during the Fall of X. The officer and all of his bridge crew that Xavier was controlling during the Fall of X, they were all clone bodies. They weren't real, actual people. They didn't even have souls for that matter. The only reason they were able to do what they were doing is because Charles was piloting them all, and he used them to destroy the Agnew. And that is kind of where, Charles Xavier turned heel. He, turned against humanity. He turned against the dream. He didn't actually really turn against the dream if you go by the logic that Charles was using. And the reason why I said, you probably heard me say earlier this was convoluted. I said it was convoluted because he did the scheme behind Orchis's back. So when he was pretending to actually be on their side, this was the ruse that he was selling them. And on top of that, the people, each of the people who he had replaced, he gave them names all based on some of his favorite authors and I guess maybe even some fictional characters. And supposedly, the X-Men were supposed to figure that out. Like, the X-Men were supposed to be able to say, all these people have all these names like Tennyson and White and Clement and whatever. Yeah, this was clearly a ruse. No, the X-Men saw it for what it was. They saw Charles Xavier acting on typical Charles Xavier bullshit. The only person who was able to figure out that this was Charles based on the very thing that Charles claimed was going to be his exonerating piece of evidence, it was a normal human who has not had contact with the X-Men in quite some time. For those who don't know, Sally has been around for about 20 years. As a matter of fact, I think this marks her 20th year anniversary as a Marvel Comics character, and I would forgive most people for not knowing who the hell she was. Probably the area where I was most familiar with her was in Generation M, where she first appeared, and during the Secret Empire story arc, where she got thrown in prison for questioning Hydra Cap and his Hydra regime for all the bullshit that they were perpetrating during Secret Empire. So no, I don't expect a lot of people to even know who this character is or even care about her existence. Like, she is a deep cut for your ass. That aside, for a character who has appeared in about roughly 43 comics in a 20-year stretch, yeah, I think this is probably the best usage we have seen of this character in quite some time, and she even gets to have a little ride off into the sunset moment, maybe that will or won't last. But the idea is that she solved the puzzle that was Charles Xavier. But the problem is Charles Xavier didn't want that puzzle to be solved, because in order to sell what he was doing, he needed everybody to think that he was the bad guy. And at the end of the day, and I think this is where everything gets kind of really dumb for me in this particular issue is that Charles said he did it for Cyclops because Cyclops was being held trial. So he did what he did to get the heat off of Cyclops because everyone was hating on Cyclops. Orcus had quite literally just deemed Cyclops as mutant terrorist #1, blaming him for every single thing that, you know, Quoted Fingers Krakoa had done. So Xavier wanted to get the heat off of him. And to be fair, I get that part of it, but the idea that Xavier went through all this trouble to save Cyclops when Cyclops was already being saved by the other X-Men, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. This whole thing smacks of trying to rehabilitate Charles. Though, once again, as I said earlier, not trying to rehabilitate Charles of any of his past crimes, but just his most recent one. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. It's a weird one shot. Like I said, honestly, I think Sally got the best storytelling in this book. We get to see her, you know, in her journey from being at the lowest that she has ever been in her life to getting to ride off into the sunset and not have a problematic ending or even a non-ending, because we really, I don't believe, saw her very much after Secret Empire. I know some people are going to want to bring up the Infinity comics, but I'm be honest with you, I don't think anybody's reading those. I mean, maybe they are, but I'm not reading them, so there you go. And even then, you know, that was the first I think she had been in anything since Secret Empire, which came out, I think, when this channel first started, which was over 6 years ago. So there you go. Anyway, I don't know how I feel about this. Yeah, you guys can probably see it on my face. Yeah, I appreciate they didn't try to completely rehabilitate Charles. If this book would have actually tried to rehabilitate Charles for every single messed up thing that he has done, I would literally call this what it is. I would call it bullshit. But at the same time, it's only really trying to absolve Charles of the one thing. Like, they're not even trying to absolve him of being a shitty dad. They're not even trying to absolve him of that. So, I mean, once again, kudos to only sticking to the Fall of X stuff. I just think that it was kind of handled a little ham-fistedly. Or I don't know, maybe not. Maybe that was intentional. Because once again, as I said earlier, the whole plan, when Charles like says it out loud, what was supposed to happen, and Sally's like, yeah, I was the only one who figured out what you were trying to do. I kind of feel like that is them, recognizing that this was dumb, that it was dumb on its face. But just the fact that it even had to be done in the first place is so silly to me that I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm good. This could have stayed in the drafts. But overall, I mean, I still think at least you get, like, I think half of a good story, because I think the first story is actually better than this half. I'm not talking about that first half story because there's really nothing to say. But it was a good story. It's something that, it's like, hey, this is a cute, sweet, heartwarming story about Jean and Cyclops. This one was a nice, cute, heartwarming story about Sally that just so happened to have to be wrapped around some Charles Xavier bullshit.